Endpoint Management. Yes, I know we are cutting it close here, but we wanted to ensure that everyone was able to prioritize watching the inaugural Microsoft. Lots of exciting things are happening, even in these uncertain times. And one of the main pillars that remains stressed upon is the importance of data security. And this is a partnership that has to occur between IT pros responsible for end-user computing, security professionals who are responsible for protecting data and defending against threats, and of course, compliance, legal and risk officers who need to manage and mitigate risk. They all come together when it comes to data security and protection. And for the endpoints, that will bring us over to the Microsoft Purview side of things, something we have yet to explore up until this point on Unpacking Endpoint Management. Now, as Rochelle, who's with me today as well, blogged about earlier in the year, we wanted to expand upon our Microsoft 365 topics across the entire breadth of the Zero Trust world. And that's why we wanted to talk about Endpoint DLP, or data loss prevention, as in my opinion, it is that last critical mile of Zero Trust, managing the endpoint for data protection and data loss prevention. So I wanted to bring on some really awesome experts for that, and I have two fantastic experts from both ends of the Microsoft Purview product spectrum. From the product group, we have Shilpa Bothra, who's always on top of the Purview product line and roadmap, and she always brings a wealth of information about ongoing innovations with the product. And then from the field, we have Ramirez, who is a principal technical specialist. And Rochelle, you know what that means. You know what that means? He is the technical specialist, not just a technical specialist. I can attest to that. Because
should you put his email out for everyone?
He has taught me so much in the last several months about the Microsoft Purview product line, and I'm just so thrilled and happy to have him here. And I'm also thrilled and happy to have Shilpa, who has kept me on top of the roadmap and also kept me honest on the roadmap as well. So welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have both of you here today.
Very excited to be here. This is something that I talk about all day, and we are doing some really cool things on Endpoint DLP. So excited to share that with everybody.
I'm also very excited, and Steve, I think I owe you a coffee for all those good things you said about me.
So I'm just going to throw this one out there to kind of kick things off. Why should organizations go with a cloud-based data loss prevention solution as opposed to traditional ones?
Oh my gosh, like so many good things come out of a cloud-based DLP. So the way we should be thinking about this is traditionally, DLP solutions have required you to have on-premises infrastructure. So think those big, bulky server rooms, right? Like you have to have them on premises. You have to build them in a way that not only are you buying them, deploying them, but you're maintaining them. There is an ongoing cost, resources, infrastructure, people who can then manage those servers. So that's just like a whole piece of infrastructure heavy that used to be what we tend to think about as what DLP solutions were. Now, over the last couple of years, this is not new to anybody. Like we are doing this virtually from like 4 different locations, right? People have moved to be virtual. Hybrid is the new norm. Your data is literally everywhere. We are all accessing different networks. We are accessing the information on different devices. So as your data is moving to the cloud, so should your solutions move to the cloud, right? Like it just makes sense. Like cloud native DLP solutions are closest to where your data is. So 1, you're saving all of that costs on infrastructure. 2, it is getting close to the source of the data. 3, on endpoint DLP particularly, traditionally you had to have some sort of an agent. So think if you're an organization and you have 100,000 users, all of your 100,000 users' devices have had to have a software agent sit on it, then that talks to your servers in the back end. Now, you have to maintain those agents. You have to reboot them. Companies often release new versions and fix bugs, so you have to keep doing that over and over again. That not only reduces productivity, but I've also heard from customers that In certain cases, it can take anywhere between 6 to 9 months to do an agent reboot, just a reboot. So think about if you have to like move to a whole different version. With cloud DLP, all of this is gone. You don't need on-premise service on your endpoints. You don't need agents. It is built into the services. So that's just like from an infrastructure perspective. The second thing I want to mention is this balance. Like we tend to think about, you shouldn't have to compromise between protection and productivity, right? Secure your data, then make sure your employees and users are productive. Like I should be able to share information with Steve and Leo when required, but also not share when not needed. And how do you balance that is because cloud native DLP solutions provide you that flexibility where you can apply granular controls and you can think about how my data is moving in different ways and where do I want to apply those restrictions or not. So those would be like top 2, 3 things that I would say organizations should really think about adopting a cloud native DLP solution.
That's awesome. Rochelle, how's the tech community doing? Do we have any questions coming in from the tech
We
community?
do. It looks like
Awesome.
we have our first question from Cody. How does DLP work with AIP/MIP to help protect the viewing and transmission of sensitive information?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one. Good question, Cody. And actually, Endpoint DLP is part of the MIP framework. So it's just one of the components of Microsoft Information Protection, and it can help protect transferring, egressing sensitive information in different scenarios. And just to give you an idea of some of the activities that can be blocked, I'd like to share a little visual because you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Oh,
I'm
demo! Demo!
I'm going to share a slide. Present. I'm going to. Looks like I am having a difficulty, but let me try this again. Share screen. Now you're used to this platform. Here we go. All right. And let me know when you guys can see my screen. There we go. So just to give you a sense of how Microsoft Purview Information Protection works, there is a data classification service that's constantly monitoring for sensitive information in different locations. And one of those locations is Endpoint DLP. That's what we're talking about today. And these are the activities that can be audited, allowed or blocked, or even blocked with override. Things like uploading to cloud locations, application control, transferring sensitive information to a USB drive or a network drive can either be audited or blocked. Printing sensitive information. Many of my customers that I talk to, these are the top things they're trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent sensitive information from being shared across USB devices or network drives. But essentially, Cody and others that may have the same question, it's just Endpoint DLP is one of the components of Microsoft Information Protection.
And the only thing I will add to what Leo said there was, so think about it as all the work that you do in information protection to identify and classify sensitive information, you can carry all of those over to Endpoint DLP. So now if I am sharing a very highly confidential document, as Leo mentioned, via print, Endpoint DLP understands that because you've done that work in information protection. And the same thing with AIP scanner. It works in very similar ways.
Thank you both. It looks like Cody had a second question, so I want to make sure we address that too. How can DLP protect that tagged information from being exfiltrated?
Right. Yeah, another good question, Cody. So you can use a sensitivity label, which you're calling a tag, another term for sensitivity label, data classification label. You can use that as a condition in Endpoint DLP rules. and then the action would actually be block. So very simple and supportive way of preventing tagged information from being exfiltrated.
Awesome.
And I can show you what that looks like. Again, pictures. I really enjoy showing customers how that looks in the real world. So how you would do that, if you go to the Purview, you can see my screen. If you go to the Purview portal and you go to data loss prevention, you click on policies. I have several policies, as you can see. And let me just click on an existing one to show you where that would be configured at. So I'm going to edit this policy. I'm going to go next. I have this policy scoped to all of my users, but this can be scoped to different users and groups. Once I get to my rule, let's edit that so you can see. And here in the conditions sections, there's multiple options. The option to prevent sensitive information, a tag, you would add content contains, and then the condition would be content is labeled, sensitivity label. Actually, the condition content contains, and then sensitivity label. Right? It would right here. And then you would choose the label that you're concerned that you want to use in your DLP policy. For example, confidential internal would probably be a good option if that's a label name in your organization.
Thanks, Leo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question to throw out here. How do I configure my DLP policies to ensure that they conform with all our legal and compliance requirements? Who wants to take that?
I can start and then Leo chime in. I think that's a good question. So the way we think about our DLP policies is when you create a DLP rule, you can think about, okay, what type of content do I want to protect? Where do I want to protect it? And what actions I want to protect them against. So for each regulation that you want to comply as an organization, you have to think about those three scenarios. Once you have them, it's very easy to configure a DLP policy. But what we do and what we provide out of the box is something that is super easy to get started with. So we provide templates. Think about how you might be a healthcare customer and what you care about is HIPAA. So you go and just what Leo was showing, as you start creating your DLP policy, you have an option to create it from the HIPAA template that we have already built for you. What that does is within a part of the template, we already select and group sensitive informations that you should be protecting. Now, that's just a baseline that we provide to get started easily. And as you build your policy and test them out in your environment, you can go back and fine tune them. So I would say that would be a really good way to get started with the regulations that you most care about.
You know, I really, really love that aspect and flexibility that we are now seeing, not just in Purview, but across the entire Microsoft 365 estate and tenant landscape here. And that's, if you want to have if you have a large granular enterprise set of customers who are going to want to dive in really deep and create these intense, granular, really specified policies, that's great. And believe me, you can do that. But for the customers who we're actually targeting, the specific personas, these aren't deep IT pro folks. These are, legal, compliance, and risk officers. And at the end of the day, they need to be able to pass audits. They need to be able to check boxes. So these templates become easy buttons for them. Like you said, HIPAA is a great example, but there's also, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, and we're not just talking about U.S. standards, but like in the U.S., for a lot of our, especially our state and local government customers, they're resource constrained as is. And so the personas that are actually going to be in the Purview console are going to be the legal and compliance officers. And so for them to be able to just tick that box and apply those templates, it's fantastic. That's why I call them easy buttons. Me, it's more because I'm lazy. So they're really lazy buttons for me.
Yeah, I always like to say, start small and then build from there, right? Like we won't suddenly tomorrow be able to climb the whole mountain, but like what are the little steps that we can take to make our data security posture better over time? And these, Steve, easy, lazy buttons are like a great way to actually get started.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, adding to that, our compliance manager solution that Steve was referring to, there's over 300 templates that you can choose from. So if you need to comply with HIPAA, NIST 853, CGIS, we have a template that you can use. And it's, one time Steve put it this way, it's like a project checklist. You're getting that step-by-step guidance on what to do, exactly what to do, check the box, and then you're going to get the points, and all while you're improving your compliance posture.
So just to translate, CGIS is the acronym for criminal justice. It's the criminal justice regulations that pretty much all law enforcement bodies, and of course, everybody's probably at this point familiar with HIPAA for private health information. So,
yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so there's literally an improvement action for sensitivity labels for solutions like Endpoint DLP. And there's also a category. So if you're on this call, you're on this feed, and you have responsibilities for managing devices, there's a whole category of improvement actions that can help you get started right away.
Awesome. It looks like we have another question that came through from Twitter, which is exciting. Can Endpoint DLP work when a device is offline and not connected?
I'll go ahead and take that one. It most certainly can. So if the file has been evaluated before the device went offline, it'll continue to protect that file, even if it's not online and off the network.
One other thing I'll add to what Leo said. So yesterday was Secure, yay. And we announced a ton of new capabilities. One really cool capability that we announced on Endpoint DLP is an extension to what Leo said. So imagine now you have your organization device and you have a file which contains sensitive information, but you haven't touched in like 10 months, right? We are bringing just-in-time protection to your endpoint DLP devices. What does that mean? So today, if with this capability, when I try to egress an old file, and by egress I mean when I try to print an old file, when I try to copy it to a USB drive, even if I've not touched the file, by touched I mean I have not modified, I have not edited it, I have not done anything with the file, it's just sitting on my endpoint devices. Endpoint DLP will kick in. It will evaluate the file at the time of egress to see whether it has anything sensitive or not. And it will analyze it. If it has sensitive content, of course, it will apply to every rule that you've set up in your DLP policies to apply restrictions. And if it doesn't have anything sensitive, it'll let you carry on the action. So I think this idea of taking proactive measures on data security. So I'm really excited about this capability and would be amiss if I didn't mention it here. So check it out.
No, and also check out Shilpa's blog that she wrote 2 days ago. Lots of information and how you can get your tenant registered for this feature that's in preview. So if we could get that posted, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll put a link up to Shilpa's blog. Okay, we've got a question from Luke on the tech community. We want to use Endpoint DLP restricted apps group and DLP policies to block uploads of files to Zoom desktop meetings from user desktops. Can you provide guidance or specific documentation on configuration in Azure Purview to work this magic? I know that was a long one.
Okay, so let me digest this one a little bit. Block uploads of files to Zoom desktop meetings.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Just to kind of get things straight, I'm going to assume you meant Microsoft Purview, because Purview is actually a combination of products on the Microsoft 365 side, which were formerly referred to as Microsoft 365 Compliance, and then what was formerly referred to as Azure Purview, which is a lot of our data catalog, data governance, and stuff that are in Azure workloads. So let me, how would we block third-party apps with the Purview solution? I guess is what we're asking here.
Yeah, there's a way to do that. And let me, again, show you how you would accomplish that.
Oh, awesome.
Luke?
I'm loving the live demos, Leo. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love doing it. I mean, to me, this is gold. So what you can do, Luke, is you can prevent that activity if you go to Endpoint DLP settings. And then there's this option for restricted applications and app groups. You can add Zoom as a restricted application. You simply need the executable name. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to assume that it could be something like Zoom EXE. Once you've identified the EXE, any sensitive information that is being egressed via Zoom will be blocked. All right.
That's awesome. It's so simple to set up.
Yeah, very simple. And then, of course, when you would also have to have that enabled in the DLP rule. That was just the first step. But let me show you the second step. So once you have that restricted app identified, you go to your policy. I'm going to use an existing policy and an existing rule. Come on. I'm going to go next all the way over to my DLP rules and then scroll down, and then I have to add audit or restrict devices, and then there's a restricted app location, and that would be within this area. Here it is, add restricted app group, or access by restricted apps. It's this one. And then you would set that to block. There's so many settings in here. Sometimes I get lost because we're constantly adding features. And that's the beauty of Endpoint DLP. It's constantly growing. And I can tell you that personally because about 3-4 years ago, I was on a team that actually incubated Purview solutions with customers. And Endpoint DLP was one of them. And it's been exciting to see all the growth we have here. I hope that answers your question, Luke, and give it a try and let us know.
Thanks, Leo. Let's see if there's any other questions that have come in. Not seeing any. Keep posting, everyone. Twitter, tech community. Okay, here's one. Can hybrid Azure AD joined devices managed by Config Manager still use Endpoint DLP?
Yes. So one of the requirements for using Endpoint DLP is it has to either be Azure AD joined, hybrid Azure AD joined, or Azure Active Directory registered. As long as it's one of those three, you'll be good. And maybe we can put also the onboarding requirements. We can post that as well.
Perfect.
Onboarding is a good topic to talk about because it's going to be the one time where we're going to have to make sure that the endpoint management team is going to make sure get these devices properly onboarded, and we don't have to worry about Windows if they've got I believe it's the 2004 version of Windows 10 or higher, 2004, which if you're running Windows 10 and you're in support and you're keeping up the life cycle, you don't need any additional agents, if I understand that correctly. So what other desktop operating systems can we also use for Endpoint DLP? Is it just Windows?
Windows and Mac. We announced our support for Mac, I want to say almost like a year-ish ago, less than a year. But yeah, we support both Windows and Mac. So everything that you're seeing that Leo's beautifully showing us in demos apply to your Mac OS devices.
Okay.
As long as your Mac OS devices are managed by Intune or JAMF, you don't need anything additional on your Mac OS devices either. And that's been something that customers have asked us for a lot. We would love everybody to use Windows, but the reality is it is multi-cloud, multi-platform. And that is really at the core of how we are thinking about capabilities in Endpoint DLP as well.
That's awesome. What about if, I noticed that in the Intune console, there's only the option to onboard to Microsoft Defender for 365. Would that also onboard me to Endpoint DLP? Or do I have to actually do two separate onboarding steps?
So if you're already using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, you're already there. All you need to do is scope policies to your users and devices that have been onboarded. However, if you're currently not using Defender for Endpoint, you do have to install an onboarding agent to make the Purview portal aware that your machines, your devices are using Endpoint DLP. And that's a very simple process.
Yep. Awesome.
And I suspect you want to see that too. It's very simple and there's options. What I'd like to show is how easy it is to get started. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So if you go to settings in the Purview portal and you go to device onboarding. Now this is considering that you're not using Defender for Endpoint. You click on device onboarding. I see all of these different devices because obviously I've already onboarded some of my devices. But say you haven't, well, you go to this onboarding tab and you select the operating system. Now there's two options, Windows 10 and Mac OS. Windows 10 also covers Windows 11. And then you choose your deployment method. And there's different options here as well. You can use either a local script. This is for small deployments or testing. But you can also use group policy to deploy this onboarding script. Again, you can use Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager or Intune. We even support onboarding for non-persistent VDIs.
Oh, okay, cool.
Couple of questions have come in. One is, can I use Endpoint DLP with servers? And if not, how do I protect data on servers?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. That's a good question. And, I get that question in the field with customers quite often. While currently Endpoint DLP doesn't cover servers, there are other ways to do this. You can use our on-premise Microsoft Information Protection Scanner to not only detect and discover files that have sensitive information, but you can also classify and protect those files as well. Another option we have with the same information protection scanner is the on-premise DLP feature that's also a workload that's covered for DLP. And we've recently introduced a new feature where you can protect network shares if that's a concern as well.
Thanks, Leo. It looks like we have a licensing question from Nigel. Are there plans to have Endpoint DLP incorporated into further license options, especially in the business line or add-on?
I can take that one. That's a good feedback. I think today our Endpoint DLP capabilities are part of our E5 subscriptions. We are currently not looking or not trying to add it into other licensing accounts, but I will take that feedback and see what we are doing, especially in the business line. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shilpa.
Yeah, there are mini SKUs, we call them, that maybe you're not aware of, Nigel. There's information protection and governance. It's a mini SKU of E5. There's also a compliance E5 mini SKU. Not mini SKU, but it's a subcomponent. So say your organization is not ready to advance all the way up to E5, you can purchase one of those SKUs as an option.
Great. Okay, another question. I want to detect and block when any source code is shared. I configured conditions to audit and restrict with the condition for source code, but when I try to share a code file within a browser, it does not block and I cannot detect. The policy doesn't work. How can I make it work? I know that was another long one.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and take a stab at that one. Now, have you tried trainable classifiers? Because this seems like a very good use case for trainable classifiers as a condition in your DLP rule.
And Leo, we already offer already trained classifier for source code. So I think that's like pre-built for you. You can use that as a condition in your DLP policies to then prevent any action. So anytime you see that sensitive information, source code being shared on your endpoint device, it should block.
Right.
So yeah, for source code, we also want to make sure that we're doing a proper, defense in-depth layered approach. Obviously, that starts with, of course, appropriate source control systems on the dev side, but ensuring that that tradable classifier is associated with the label. And of course, the thing I like the most about Endpoint DLP is these automatic label policies. You no longer have to rely, I use this all the time. You no longer have to rely on humans to do the right thing. Because before DLP can actually protect something, that it needs to be identified. It needs to be labeled. And so you also want to make sure that you have some excellent auto labeling policies in place to actually, set that up appropriately. And again, I'll shut up and let the experts actually chime in.
I will also say, we are our DLP is integrated into Microsoft Edge browser. So Edge on your Windows machine or your Mac machine can be an enlightened browser where you can very granularly apply policies to the Edge browser. If you, however, are using Chrome or Firefox, download our Microsoft Purview extension for those browsers, and then your DLP policies will move over. You'll be able to configure them for those browsers as well as Safari on the Mac. So make sure if you're not using the extension, you use the extension, and then your policy should work.
Awesome. Steve, I know you were mentioning some things, excuse me, about labeling, and there's another question here on that topic. If I need to label something as proprietary automatically, how would Microsoft know to label it as such? It's not like Microsoft would have knowledge of an information type that only exists in our org.
Ah, the chicken and egg scenario there. Yeah, I love that one. I get the one a lot.
Yeah, I love all these questions. Again, another common question, because especially if you're in a regulated industry, you might have sensitive information that is specific to your organization. And you can actually use something that's called custom sensitive information types. You can build your own classifier and then use that classifier as a condition in a sensitivity label. Very simple to set up. And, let me show you where you would do that.
You would train our AI essentially, right? Yeah.
Correct. So if you go we're in the compliance portal, the purview portal, and if you go to data classification and then classifiers, we have sensitive information types. And we have over 300 that you can use. These are out of the box. And these are going to be things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers. But say to the question, what if you need to create your own? Well, look, you can create your own. And you just simply put in you go through the wizard, you give it a name. I'm just going to say my own SID. And you give it a description. Click next, and then you create your patterns. And these patterns can be made up of things like regular expressions. They can be keyword lists. They can be keyword dictionaries. They can be functions. So this is the way you would do it. And then you would add it as a condition when you're building your sensitivity labels to do this automatically.
And the other piece, as you see on Leo's screen, is that trainable classifier tab. That is where you can actually use documents to train your own classifier type. So in this case, you could also be like, hey, this sensitive information type is very, very unique to my organization. All you do is like upload anywhere between 50 to 500 documents that might have that kind of information present, and the machine learning algorithm will work to create a classifier for you. You have all the controls. So you can go back and say, yes, this detected correctly in this document, but not in this document. So like feed that back to the algorithm and make it better. That would also be a very good way to achieve, in addition to what you said.
Yeah, and that's where you would find the option for source code as well.
Okay, we've got another question here. What happens to DLP audit and alert events when the endpoint device disconnects from the internet?
I can take that one. So if the device is disconnected from the internet, what's going to happen is those alerts and events are going to be cached on the device. And once it comes back online, it's going to synchronize back up to the cloud, where those will be, those alerts and those activities will be viewable in the Purview Compliance Portal.
Yeah, that's always a reluctant. There's always a reluctancy because of offline behavior. And, the thing that I like to, drive home is once the policies comes from the cloud, it doesn't matter that it comes from the cloud, even if it came from an on-premise server. Once the policy's down on that machine, that policy is in control.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of it working that way is with some other DLP solutions, if there's a software that is controlling the behavior of the DLP, what if the EXE stops? Well, DLP stops working. That's not an issue with Microsoft Purview Endpoint DLP because it's not reliant on an agent.
Another question, can I use Endpoint DLP with bring your own device scenarios?
So this, because the Endpoint DLP has to be enrolled, it has to be onboarded with Azure Active Directory, hybrid, Azure Active Directory, or AAD registered. Those aren't BYOD scenarios. But
Well, I mean, like I said, I use my own personal device at Microsoft, but Microsoft basically said, well, you may think it's a personal device and you may have paid for the device, but we're now controlling it and managing it like a corporate device.
Yeah, and that's probably because you registered it. When you
Yep.
signed into the Office application, it may be that you forgot to check that box. Don't let my agents or my organization manage this device. Now, when you do that, in that scenario, yes, you're BYOD because it's registered with Azure Active Directory.
So what about web-based email applications? How would I monitor those with DLP?
So those can be monitored or restricted as sensitive service domains. That's a setting in the Endpoint DLP settings that how you would do that. So, for example, am I still sharing?
Now you are.
Okay. Good, that was easy. So if you go to Endpoint DLP settings, and then browser and domain restrictions, you can add certain service domains. You can either allow or block them. Now I have these allowed because this is my organization's SharePoint site. I want to always allow sensitive information to be transferred here. But if there's something I wanted to block, maybe it's Google or another web-based email application, I can put block domains in there as well.
And I'll point our viewers to the mechanics video that we released, I think last month. So if we can put the link up on the screen, that goes into all of the endpoint DLP settings and how you configure different things for your endpoint DLP to work. Everything that's Leo's talked about should be in that video, and we'll walk you through it. So check it out.
Also, and I'll have to hunt this chat up or hunt the link up, but Leo did a webinar on YouTube talking about, in particular, third-party cloud apps and when to use information protection in DLP, and also when to use the other product related to that, which is called Defender for Cloud Apps. But I will search for that one while we're.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Steve. What else we got?
These are great questions.
Oh, yeah.
What else are you guys hearing from customers? Like if you could share something that you think would be really valuable to people tuning in right now, what are you hearing out there?
I can start, and then Leo would love for you to chime in as well. I think one thing that I hear a lot is about great endpoint DLP helps me with a content first protection. How do we, excuse me, how do we take that next step of bringing in and enriching it with user insights? And we recently, earlier in the year, announced what we are calling adaptive protection. So now think about it this way. I'm going to take an example and pick on Leo for a minute here. So Leo and I work in the same company. We are working on this highly confidential project. Let's call it Project X, because I can't come up with a better name right now. But I might be a person who's like submitted my resignation and I am going to go work for a competitor company. Now, suddenly I start to download a ton of information. I start to print a ton of information, which is signaling that my activities are risky. So the system can see that and it will automatically identify me as a more risky individual than Leo. So the DLP policies for me will be more restrictive, and for Leo, they will be less restrictive. And as and when I do less and less risky activities, the DLP policies will automatically adjust to my behavior. So this is something that the customers have been asking for a lot. We recently announced it, and all of this is like automatic. So what this does is it actually takes that manual effort that a lot of DLP administrators today have to spend to manually scope DLP policies to users. This takes all of that away, and then you can let the system do this for you in the back end. We are receiving really good response from customers and a lot of excitement around this. So I would say check adaptive protection out. It is really cool.
Yeah, and also what I hear a lot in the field and working with customers is they don't know where to get started. Well, because they either don't have a data classification policy, they don't have test scenarios, they don't have they have their use cases, but they don't have success criteria defined.
They don't even know their data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't know where their data is.
It's unstructured. Yeah.
But we provide you with tools that you can use to help you discover where that sensitive data is, and then put protection settings on it where needed and how needed. There's also plenty of guidance. There's a Ninja article that you can actually use, a DLP Ninja article, and it starts from beginner, intermediate, and advanced. If you want to up your game, elevate your game on data loss prevention, check out that Ninja article. We also have these interactive guides you can use, so you can actually test drive how the solutions work before you get started.
And Leo, don't we, like today, if customers just go to Purview portal and go to data classification, like we can do that, provide that visibility automatically without any policy configuration. So you really don't need to do anything. Just go to that portal, click a button. Within 24 hours, you will get a view of where your sensitive data lives, SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, devices, how much do you have, what kind of data you have. And I think that is just so powerful because once you have that visibility, then you can think about, okay, this is the kind of data that I want to tackle first. Again, I will go back to start small, build from there, and start to fine tune your policies.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And where you could do that, if I could share my screen again. We were there earlier, but once again, Microsoft Purview portal. And if you go to the overview tab, you can actually get some high-level insights right here, this dashboard, on where sensitive information is being detected. Like I obviously have a lot of US Social Security numbers out there. And if I scroll down, I see these are being identified, actually right here. It will bring me over to the Content Explorer, where I can filter. I have options for sensitive information types, sensitivity labels, retention labels, and even trainable classifiers. But right now we're talking about where sensitive information is. Well, if I click on US Social Security number, I see that I have over 140,000 files that have Social Security numbers in them.
Wow.
And they're in locations like Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And I can drill into these folders and get more details and then build my policies accordingly.
Yeah, and then the same thing, Leo, if we pop over to Activity Explorer real quick, not only you see, so Content Explorer is like the view from a content perspective, what you have, where you have, how much do you have. Activity Explorer is all about what activities are happening on those files. So here you'll be able to see things like, oh, DLP rule matched. How many files did I try to print? How many files did I try to copy to USB? So this takes like an activity action oriented view versus Content Explorer is a more content oriented view. So based on what you're trying to restrict, block, these two portals are a great place to get started, to just get a sense of what's happening in your data landscape.
Yeah, and because we're talking about Endpoint DLP today, if you were to filter the location by endpoint devices, this is going to show us all of those activities related to Endpoint DLP. So this is going to take me back a week.
And that's such good information. That is such good information. Not just, I mean, if I've got a SOC, Security Operations Center, stood up, and I'm using a SIEM like Microsoft Sentinel, can that also ingest this information like it would Defender, or how would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can actually use the Office 365 management, or excuse me, there's a connector in Sentinel that you can use to add all alerts from DLP and Microsoft Purview information protection.
Awesome.
So you can use that connector to get those insights.
In all of these alerts in information protection and DLP actually show up in your Defender portal. So when you're doing incident management in your Defender portal, they will be grouped per incident. So you can now see all of these alerts in Defender and then use the connector to pull them into Sentinel if that is your choice of product.
Yeah. And I can show you that as well. I have that configured in my environment. These are my incidents in the security, in the Defender portal. And as Shilpa mentioned, you simply filter by incidents. And this is showing me all activity, all incidents related to data loss prevention. These can be assigned to users. You can see who the impacted assets are, the severity level. There's a great blog that was posted, I want to say a few months back, that goes into detail on how you can use this workflow to within your SOC.
Awesome. We have a few minutes and we have a couple more questions that have trickled in. One, if a user is removed from a group scoped to an endpoint DLP policy, how long does it take for the change?
That's a good question. And, so if a user, for example, say that I'm in a group called HR, and it's scoped to a DLP policy. And if I happen to fall out that group because I get transferred to a different position, it's going to take 24 hours for that to be updated in the DLP rule, whether I'm added or removed.
Thanks, Leo. Another question, can I set up different restrictions for subsets of printers or USB devices? What about for a specific VPN or network share?
I love that one because I've actually started playing with that a few weeks ago. You can. And is that something I can show real quick?
Yeah.
So how you would start with that is going back to the Purview portal and going to your Endpoint DLP settings. So you can do restrictions, or you can set up printer groups. You can also set up USB device groups or network share groups. For this scenario, I set up some share groups, some network share groups. There's some specific paths that I wanted to allow in my DLP rules instead of blocking those outright, but I want to block everything else. So first step is to configure the allow group, the share group. And this could be, again, for network share, removable device, or printer. And then you configure the setting in your DLP rule. This is an example. I scoped it to the correct users. And in this example, I'm using IP addresses. If these are detected across network shares, I want to block them outright. But if they go to a specific allowed network share path that's in my group, I only want to audit it. So, and how that looks like on the endpoint is these are some IP addresses I have in this file. If I try to transfer them to this shared drive, it's going to be blocked. And I'm going to get this obvious pop-up notification. But because this path is allowed, it's not blocked. So very flexible on how you can configure those allow and share groups, printers and USBs as well.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we're coming up on time here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask our guests today if they have any final tips or insights. So I'll start with you, Shilpa. You have any final parting thoughts here?
We are investing a lot in our DLP solution. Just the amount of new capabilities that we've announced over the years and Secure yesterday is just massive. One parting thought would be get started with Endpoint DLP. You do not need an agent. You do not need to deploy, maintain on-premise infrastructure. It is really that easy and simple, as Leo showed us several times today. So I would just leave audience with get started.
Awesome. What about you, Leo?
No, I will agree with that. I mean, it's easy to get started. I mean, there's an in-product trial. If you just go to the Purview Compliance Portal, you could do a trial just like that. And you can get guidance. Not only, there's programs we have within Microsoft. If you're already a customer, you can use Fast Track. If you're interested in getting started and don't currently own licensing, you could get started with your account rep and perhaps do a POC. Join the customer community for these private previews that are going and all these new releases that Shilpa was talking about. That would be my advice. Get started.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you both for coming. This has been an incredible episode. I will also give a shameless plug. We were talking about easy buttons. We've got a whole subject, a whole episode dedicated to easy buttons on our next one coming up in toward the end of April. But again, we really appreciate you guys joining us, and we appreciate all the engagement from you, the audience. And I will sign off. And for myself, for Rochelle, our two guests, and as well for Mr. Guillory, my partner in crime, who was unable to make it due to his previous obligations, we will see you next time on Unpacking Endpoint Management. Thank you.